Hey, Renter Retires. It's Adam Schroeder here along with Zach Lemaster for another episode. And we are joined today by Brian O'Neill. He is with the Wicked Smart group with Chris Prefontaine. We've had a couple episodes with them and had some really good feedback from everybody. And so we wanted to bring on, if you listened to the last episode, you're going to know who this guy is. If you didn't listen to the last episode, go back and listen to it first. This is the guy that Chris talked about who went from from elevator salesman to real estate success story. Now coaching with him and doing some really great things. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Guys, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Well, let's go back and start from the beginning. So how did you get started in real estate? Kind of what is your origin story when it comes to just getting started in the real estate sector in general?
Yeah. So like a lot of people, Adam, I wanted to be in real estate for a long time. I tell the group this story all the time. I named my LLC 7 years before I actually had the what to start it, right? To open it up. And that was sitting in my iPhone. I still saved the note. I named the business and never did anything with it. I was stuck in corporate for pretty much my whole life. I was fed the same story that a lot of us were fed, which was, go to school, get a good job, pour as much money into your retirement account as possible, look for a company with a great management training program, and work there until you retire, climb the corporate ladder. That was my download. Nothing wrong with my parents, but that's what I was fed and I believed it. And that's what I was supposed to do. And as I started to get to a higher level, one thing about sales is you always plateau. Like there's only so much money you can earn unless you trade your time for dollars. And as I got to that point in my life, I really started to look at, this is not going to be me long term. I don't want to be that guy. And that coupled with the fact that I had a young son, he's 11 now, but back when I was really evaluating this, he was small, 4 or 5 years old, and I was traveling 100,000 miles a year. I was gone all the time selling elevators, North America, Europe. I was all over the place. And as he got older, he started to voice his opinion as to me being gone. Like, hey, Dad, I don't like when you leave. I'm scared to be in the house with Mom by myself. So I was already upset about not chasing my dreams. And then I got my 5-year-old kid telling me this. So that ate away at me. And that's what ultimately pushed me over the edge to do something different. And the biggest block for me was I didn't have somebody in my corner. I don't know what it is about growing up. We have coaches and mentors. If we're in sports, if we go to church, we're in school, we have people helping us all along the way. When I got through school, I was like, no, I'm good. I got it all figured out. I don't need anybody's help anymore. That's why I was stuck in corporate for 25 years. Once I hired a coach, Chris, that's when my life started to change and change very, very quickly. So I wish I would have done it sooner.
So let's get to it. What was the name of the LLC?
Yeah, the name of the LLC was BKW Investment Group, and that's initials for my family. And it's been sitting in my phone it's been 10 years now, but I started it 7 years ago before I actually filed it.
And now you're using it, right? That is your LLC.
That's it. I'm using it now. Yep.
Brian, I love this story because I think this will resonate with so many of our community and listeners just that want to get out of the job that they're doing. And it's not always because, this is a lifestyle choice, really, as you mentioned, to choose to be home with your family more. There's a lot of different reasons. There's people that really dislike what they do, but that's probably actually a small portion of the people that really want to chase a full-time dream in real estate. There's people that earn high income and, are professionals, and myself included, with an optometry background. People come up to me and say, oh, well, you left that career because it wasn't right for you or you didn't like it. Well, that's not the case. It's more of a lifestyle choice. And to your point about trading time for money, being able to expedite and exponentially increase your income and business efforts through something like real estate, where it's not time associated and you can be more creative to make those exponential gains and set your family up for generational wealth and success. And that's really what it's about. I think the why behind it. It's really cool to talk to someone that's taken that leap. Let's dive into that a little bit deeper about specifically. I mean, what's the timeline associated with it? With okay, you found Chris and went through his coaching program and really surrounded yourself with this community, as you mentioned, and that is huge. I love the point about coaching because that's something that can take your level of business and understanding to the next level. Is just surrounding yourself with the right people and having the right people in your corner. But what's the timeline before, like, okay, you started the coaching program and then you started doing deals, and then when were you able to transition out of the sales aspect?
Yeah, so this was December of 19, so the end of 2019, right before COVID hit. Right, nobody knew this was coming. So I had, and just to back up a minute, what I had been trying to do real estate deals for a couple of years. I was trying to buy multifamily, and I was acting like a real estate investor, downloading all the podcasts and reading all the books. I even looked at a few deals. My biggest fears were revolved around investing my own money, which is a huge block for a lot of people in real estate, investing your own money, the fear of losing money. And then even further, going and asking my friends and family, hey, invest alongside of me. So letting other people down. And that's what ultimately was keeping me blocked. I didn't know what I was doing. So it was right around that time that I found Chris talking about how he bought his building on a podcast, how he bought his building on owner financing. And I said, boom, that's exactly what I need to learn more about. I ran straight to it. Okay. So podcasts are great. So it was meant to be. I found them. And I came into the program. I came into the Wicked Smart community in 2019. I made my first dial on December 16th, I think it was. I wrote it down. It was a great day. And I got my first house under agreement, was 71 days later. I've been in sales for 25 years. I screamed. And my wife was like, well, what's going on? I said, the seller signed the contract, right? Because I had been really hammering it out. I'd been on the phone and I was working at the same time too. I was still flying. So I was doing this in hotel rooms and, airport lounges, just whenever I could, because I wanted to be out of that life bad enough. And that's really a big motivator for a lot of people is, you have to have a reason why you want to do this. Again, I already mentioned it was my family, my son. And I was willing to do what it took. And I took the coaching advice. So 71 days, I actually lost that deal. I had to give it back to the seller. A few weeks later, I got my first house under agreement and sold it, put a buyer in it. So I was able to collect the 3 paydays. And then I really started getting some momentum, houses under agreement. I had set a goal to leave my job in 24 months, which is really just a placeholder. I ended up doing it in 9.
No, I love that. So first deal, 70 days roughly, even though that one fell through, you got it under contract, which is a huge win. Shortly thereafter, had the first deal that then you were able to complete with the end transaction with the buyer. Mm-hmm. And then within a shorter, period of time, then your goal actually leave your corporate position. And just for anyone that's listening to this for the first time and unfamiliar with Chris Prefontaine or the Wicked Smart community, we interviewed Chris just a few months ago on our podcast, and then immediately our community reached out and said, hey, we want to learn more about this. This is a topic that we want to hear more about. It's very relevant, especially right now, and just an awesome creative way to scale your portfolio much quicker. Basically, what the program is about is around creative financing to acquire deals, not buying more deals using strategies that we'll talk about, like seller finance, subject to, lease option, ways that you can acquire more real estate without actually having to sign on loans, not involving banks, and not involving any of your capital or very little capital out of pocket. So it's a creative way where you really don't have a ceiling, right? There's no ceiling. It's limited by your creativity. You got to grind it out and you got to learn it and apply those methods and surround yourself with the right people. But it's ultimately a way where you're not having to save up another down payment, and you can be an active investor just like you did, Brian, to replace your active income rather quickly. So I love this story. I think this will really hit home to a lot of people that want to replace their income, be a more active investor earlier on.
Yeah, great point.
I want to go over the 71 days you were talking about. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing? Because you said, you had your full-time gig, you were doing this. Were you putting in like an extra 8 hours a day? Were you just doing, like an hour here, an hour there. Talk to us a little bit about those first 71.
Absolutely. So number one, I was, Chris's partner is Zach, younger guy, but he was my first coach, and he told me, and I could probably be his dad. I think there was an age gap there, so it took me a mindset shift to be like, hey, listen, you need to surrender to this. Okay. What you were doing before didn't work for you, Brian. You're in this corporate job. You want out, listen to the people. So if you hire a coach, make sure that you listen, right? Don't come in knowing everything. I completely surrendered. I think that's one of the reasons I was successful in a short amount of time. Then what they taught me was, hey, look, 24 hours is 24 hours. You don't get to create extra time here. You just have to choose your time wisely. So instead of watching, Netflix in the hotel room, I called sellers. Instead of watching a movie or reading a book in the airport lounge, I called sellers. I just made different choices, and that's powerful. When you decide, you can change your life and you can really move the needle forward. So I called sellers when I could. I was probably dedicating anywhere from 10 to 12 hours per week to the business, which was enough for me. And then when COVID hit, I had more time because I was home all the time and I wasn't flying. So I would just, whenever I had an opportunity here or there, I would make the dials. And then as the business ramped up, I was the first 71 days, was really just me calling as many people as I could and getting super good on the phone, which is really the skill that you need to develop to be able to do these deals on a creatively.
Well, I want to talk, and we want to go through your whole story here. We want to talk about the other deals you've done, your portfolio, fast forward to where you're at today, and what your financial picture looks like compared to maybe the corporate space, and where you're going to be in the future compared to that as well. I'm sure you think about that quite often. If you just continue that path, without any intervention, where you might be. But I want to talk about just like the way that you're acquiring deals. When we talk about real estate investing, it's this broad spectrum of so many different ways you can participate in real estate. But for someone that's just like, hey, Brian, what are you doing? Like, how are you acquiring deals? Can you explain it for just layman terms, like your method in building your portfolio?
Certainly. So very high level, when we're talking about creative financing, we're talking about using the seller to buy the property. That's probably the easiest way I can explain it without going out and either raising money or using a bank loan to acquire a property, whether it's single family or multifamily. You use the seller as the bank, whether they have a mortgage or not. So I'll just give two quick examples. If a seller owns a house free and clear, no debt, which is roughly about a third, probably higher, of all homes in the United States are owned with no debt, I can go to a seller. I can go to you and say, hey, Zach, you be the bank for me. Okay, I can pay you your price, maybe even a premium over and above if you give me the term that I want. And we structure something on seller financing where we agree upon a price, a monthly payment to you, and then a term before you would get the rest of your equity. And that can be 3 years, that can be 30. It just depends on what we agree to. And if you can structure that type of a situation with a seller and solve their problem, because they have to have some type of problem or be in a position where they don't need their money right now, they have to wait for their money, those can be really lucrative. I mean, owner financing deals can be 6 figures and beyond if you structure them the right way. With someone who has a mortgage in place, again, they have debt. You can use that to your advantage on seller. You can still do seller financing. We would just call it subject to. So I would buy somebody's house subject to their existing loan. If they had a $200,000 loan, that loan stays in place. I pay it every month. The deed transfers over to me. They're out. They're completely out of it. I own the house. We make the payments. If anything goes wrong with the house, we cover it. The seller can move on and be done with the property, which is really a lot of what we're doing when we're buying creatively, is we're solving a problem that a seller has, whether they can't afford the house, they couldn't sell it, they couldn't get the price that they wanted, or they have to leave and they just need to be done with the property. So those are two kind of high level methods of how we purchase.
This is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, especially if they're just hearing this for the first time or trying to figure out like, well, why would, because they're so aligned with the traditional way that real estate works, right? With
Yeah.
agents, brokers, and banks. And it's like, it really comes down to education and learning these different strategies. But I mean, this is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp. Like, why would a seller, do this? And I think you just answered that question. I'm thinking about this kind of real time where we're at right now. We've had this crazy hot market, and we've had these, sellers that basically have been able to demand their price point. And now the market is shifting and normalizing, really, in a lot of cases. And so you have a lot of people where, they still have this stuck in their mind that they want this price, but the market doesn't dictate that now. So instead of lowering their price, they have these expired listings. And I mean, that's one way to get sellers potentially. Also, on someone that has an existing mortgage with where interest rates are right now, it could be a really advantageous thing to get to take over a mortgage with a lower interest rate. You know what I mean? So, I mean, but my question would be to you, Brian, like, give us a little bit more insight on like maybe some real world scenarios or like people that you're talking to. Where are these leads coming from to sell these properties via financing terms this way? And kind of like, why are they doing it? I mean, is it for someone that has a free and clear property? Is it a tax thing? They don't want to, is this a retirement picture? I mean, I'm sure it's all the above, but what are you seeing on a regular basis?
Sure. And it is all of the above. So primarily, I'm looking for people who are actively trying to sell their property because that causes pain if they don't sell. So an expired listing, for sale by owner, even for rent by owners, people who are trying to rent their houses may have already tried to sell it but couldn't, so they just default to rent because that's all people know. People know, put a sign in your yard, sell it. If it doesn't work out, keep lowering the price until somebody raises their hand and says, hey, I'll buy it at that number. There's other ways to do this. And what we try to do is educate sellers like, hey, you have another option available to you, and it's seller financing, it's terms. And you said something that was interesting was, why would somebody want to do this? And I say the opposite. There's more reasons why they would do it versus why they wouldn't. Okay. Because in any market, even when the market was scorching hot, there's always, and this to be true in your business, there's always going to be a situation where you have death, divorce, job loss, job relocation, stuff that the traditional market cannot necessarily solve. And that's where we can come in by having this skill to be able to purchase on creative financing and solve the seller's problem and get them out from under the house. But primarily, we're looking for people who are actively trying to sell. And then there's other things you can do, like pull lists. COVID caused a lot of tired landlords, accidental landlords and tired landlords that want out. I can't tell you how many times I talked to a seller who says, I just want to be out of the landlord business. When I hear that, I focus on that problem. I don't focus on the price that they want or the monthly payment. It's just like, look, I can get you out of the landlord business permanently if you're willing to sell your property on seller financing and leave your loan in place.
And solving problems is really what it's about, right? It's not always problems. It's just educating the seller on what their options are. I love that you brought that up because many sellers haven't even potentially considered this. And what I love about creative financing and acquiring deals this way is, at least in my opinion, it is the most beneficial way for sellers to sell their property, and beneficial. It's a win-win-win scenario, and probably the most beneficial for all parties involved out of all types of real estate transactions. A lot of times you're in a traditional sale, you're in negotiations with people on price. Someone's having to lower the price that they want. They're not, or make additional repairs, and they have to sacrifice somewhere. In this type of scenario, you're really assisting the seller. It's to meet their needs, right? You're solving their issue if there is one, and you're meeting their needs and educating them on the options. Would you agree with that, Brian? Or
yeah, absolutely. And I'll just give you a couple of quick examples of sellers that I've helped, and they all have a story, right? And they couldn't sell the house. They bought another property. The first house that I ever purchased, the woman bought a condo. She was going there, like she already purchased it, didn't need the money from the proceeds of this house to buy the other place. She was good with her loan. She just couldn't sell the house. So I called her up and said, hey, here's this other alternative for you. She's like, I'm good with that. I can do that. And I mean, that happened in about 2 weeks, right? Because she had a specific scenario and I could solve that problem with terms. I gave her $10. I got control of the house. And I've done that multiple times. Other sellers will have a situation where they're getting, divorced. And like, this is the only thing that's holding them back from, being done with each other is the property, but they couldn't sell it. Right. And I've had conversations with sellers where they just said, I just want to be done with this. And in those scenarios, terms, creative financing is such a great option. And, we obviously do this to make money, right? But to be able to hear, hey, like, you really got me out of a jam, Brian, you really helped me. That just makes it much more gratifying, because it's a personal relationship with the seller, because you really are helping them move to the next stage of their life.
Let's talk about that conversation, what you were saying, maybe the divorce or job movement. How do you structure your conversation whenever you go into this to figure out which one of the three is going to work best? Like, what are some of the big things that people need to be considering asking if they're having these conversations?
Yeah, I love this question. And I've spent a lot of time on my phone skills, because I talk to a lot of sellers. My team, we're talking to sellers all day long, right? And ultimately, what we're trying to discover, Zach, is when and the idea here is we're really eliminating, right? Because we're not looking for the retail seller. They're going to do their thing and sell for top price and use a realtor. We're looking for like a couple of keywords, like, I have to move. I'm relocating, and I'm already there, or the house is vacant, or I'm tired of being a landlord. I don't want to deal with the property anymore. I'm old. So we're listening for things, and we do that by asking questions. So I can give you kind of a quick script of what we do when we talk to sellers, and it's really just a conversation. Like, treat it like, what would you do if your neighbor put a for sale sign in the yard? What would you do? You'd go over and talk to them and just have a friendly conversation. Like, hey, why are you selling the house? Where are you going? When do you need to be there? Now we add more to it. Like, hey, if you did sell it, what was the price you were hoping to get? I don't look at the listing and say, I see you're asking 500. I ask them what they want. And then I'll say, why do you think it didn't sell? So if you can find out why somebody's selling and dig deeper, they'll tell you what their motivation is, or they won't. If they tell you, then that's when you can say, hey, look, if I could help you solve that problem, move closer to your family, and you don't have to worry about this house anymore, I'll take over all your payments. Are you open to the idea of selling on either a lease purchase or owner financing? That's how the conversation goes. Not, hey, I'm going to buy your house on the first phone call. We have to uncover if there's a problem that we can solve first.
Adam's a skeptic by nature, and so he always gets into the what if scenarios. And this is, I think, something that is also hard to kind of wrap your head around. Is, okay, like, how does this actually work? And we have a couple different scenarios. So you outlined, someone has a free and clear property. Basically, they can be the bank, right? You just structure terms, whatever makes sense for them. Usually, it's advantageous for you to have low down payment or no down payment, $10, I guess, in one case. And then ideally, potential interest only, or not interest only, but principal only payments, right? For or very low interest. That's realistic, and it's an advantage to the seller because they're basically getting, guaranteed payments for an extended amount of time. And they're getting the price that they want. So, but what are some what ifs that you commonly hear about with people that are learning about this process? Some that come to my mind would be like, from a seller perspective, like, what if this person stops paying me? You're on the deed. You're actually the owner of the property. How do you solve the what if there? And also, I guess another one is around the bank's taking over the mortgage. But more importantly, first with the seller, like, how do I trust this guy? You know what I mean? To take care of this property and pay me.
Yeah, you're talking to people, and for most of them, this is their number one asset, is their house, right? So it's not a decision they're gonna make overnight or even on the spot, unless they're really, really in pain. I've had that happen one time, but it's really, you're taking them through the steps, right? Again, first call is discovery. You're educating them, and then you're building rapport along the way, and building rapport by being there and educating them and being an authority and being able to respond to their objections. Like you said, hey, what if you stop paying me? And, that's a question I get asked all the time, like, what if? And I always tell sellers, I said, look, it's never my intention to not fulfill my obligation to you. Okay. This is how we make a living. we're going to make your mortgage payments. We buy tons of properties. I said, but look, ultimately, if this is something that's going to keep you up at night, don't do it. I tell every seller that, and I want them to understand that I'm okay with that. I don't want them worrying about it. But the objection is, I always answer it like, hey, this is my intention. This is what I intend to do. You and I are going to meet on multiple occasions. I'm going to come to your house. I'm going to look at your property. We're going to have multiple phone calls. I'll make you feel as comfortable as possible. But at the end of the day, you have to be okay with it.
Yeah. So you mentioned that. So when you're talking to these people, how much of it is on the phone? How much of it is face to face? And what is kind of the breakdown? How many conversations are you generally having before they're comfortable with you? Like what does that part look like?
Yeah. So there's normally probably a seller that is going to do this. There's probably 4 or 5 phone conversations and at least 1 meeting in person, because I got to go see the house. And I throw it back to the seller too. And I say, look, I wouldn't, because I get a lot of sellers that we talk to, like, make an offer. That's just like their text message back. And I would say I would never make an offer on a house that I didn't see. And further, I would want to know you. Right. So I always say that to the seller, like, look, we're going to meet in person. We have to feel comfortable with each other. Me have to feel comfortable with you and vice versa. So it's typically like 4 to 5 touches. And then normally they feel comfortable.
Let's and I want to get deeper into your story and talk about specific deals, Brian, but just for someone that's still trying to kind of figure this out, just to as cleanly as possible to kind of talk about the strategies here. We have subject to is one, right? This is where you're taking over someone's existing mortgage. Like you're buying the property, you're actually taking title to it subject to the existing mortgage. And that's someone, I think probably those scenarios would be someone that is in potential more pain, potentially like pre-foreclosure. What other kind of buyer profile or seller profiles fit the kind of the subject to scenario? And what are you looking for in the house? Do they need to have equity? Does it need to cash flow based on the rents? Talk about a subject to deal, how it's structured and when that applies.
Yeah. I'll give you a couple examples and I normally just kind of let the deal come to me based on what I'm hearing on the phone. But standard subject to, and again, we are buying it subject to your existing loan. You can buy anything subject to, boats, cars, whatever. As long as the seller is open to it, you can buy subject to existing debt. If the seller has low equity, maybe the house is worth 200, maybe they owe 200,000 and the house is worth 210, like they're writing a check if they're using a realtor. They got to pay to get out of the house, which is just crazy. You don't have to do that. And I can buy the house for 200,000 exactly on the money. Their loan stays in place. I'll pay their closing costs. So they don't have to spend a dime, versus if they sold it with a realtor, they were writing a check to get out of the house. They can go move on. So that's one scenario that's very common: low equity, tight equity. And a lot of different scenarios can occur there. People who bought their house just a couple of years ago, right, and haven't put a low down payment down, or they bought the house incorrectly. There's so many different situations that would arise there. And as long as the monthly payment, like let's say the monthly payment's $1,500 all in, and I can rent that or put a buyer in there for $1,800, it makes sense for me. You're paying closing costs and cash flowing or right off the bat. That's a great deal for us. And then again, the seller's happy because they get to move on. Their other alternative was they were going to have to give the house back or write a check at the closing table. I
love that. And what about seller finance? This is someone probably where they don't have a loan in place, right? And why would someone do this route, and how's it structured?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of 2 quick categories. Number one, you have an inherited property. Okay. So the kids inherited mom and dad's property and they don't know what to do with it. And maybe those are a little bit more challenging because you normally have 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 people to work that out, but they don't know what to do with the house and they just want to be done with it. So they're open to a seller financing type of structure. People who are free and clear on their house for tax purposes, and disclaimer, I'm not giving tax advice, but for tax purposes and estate planning purposes, they see the benefit. They get it, right? They see the benefit of taking payments over a long period of time versus the lump sum. We're working on a deal right now in another state with one of our students. I've had multiple conversations with the seller. They can't sell the house. They live in another state. They were renting it. They couldn't get their number. They're open to doing something on owner financing. We're going to pay them a little bit of interest, reasonable interest, because they said, hey, look, we'll just lower this is a great example. We're going to lower the price, take our lump sum and invest it and get this return, this percentage return. And I told the student, I said, well, we can do that. Get them back on the phone. And I said, look, you don't need to do that. I can pay you your return. It's backed by real estate. The deed will transfer to us. And I simply asked the guy, I said, look, if we could do that and get to your price, how long would you be willing to go? And they were talking on the phone, and the two of them, they said, oh, probably 10 or 15 years. They wrote the deal for me right there. So 15-year owner financing. We're going to get them to their number, and we're just going to make monthly payments to them with interest, but no money down. I mean, it's a super, super deal, but they get it. They understand they're going to get way more money for their house by collecting interest and backed by real estate.
And when you say backed by real estate, so they're still, I mean, they are the bank, right? They have a lien on the property.
For first mortgage, yeah, first lien position. We take the deed. So, I mean, again, they ask the same question. Hey, what if you default? Like, you're the bank.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you went through that scenario of how to just, it's just structuring it so it makes sense for them. And seller financing for more savvy investors, this is fairly common in businesses, in multifamily, commercial. Usually those owners understand a little bit more. It's just maybe the mom and pop owners on the single family side that you got to educate about this. But seller financing happens quite often. And can be, a big advantage, like you said, for not having agents and brokers involved in fees and bank fees and lender fees. I mean, it adds up extremely quickly. Totally. What about, and then the other one that maybe isn't as commonly used would be the lease option, or is there another option? Is that right?
Yeah. Lease option, lease purchase, which is control of the property without actually owning it. A couple of advantages there. The deed stays with the seller. So that's an advantage for the seller. They get all the benefits of ownership without having to deal with the property. We still cover expenses and repairs and everything else. We just don't own the house. So we don't get that depreciation benefit. But then we're not typically putting any money down. So, the first 9, 10 houses I did, I gave the seller a total of $20. And I have control of $4 million worth of real estate for $20.
And that was lease option?
Those are all lease options, right? Yeah, that math works.
And so in that scenario, you have a lease to, and then is it an option to buy? Can you go through the details of how that works a little bit more specifically?
Yeah, it's a lease with an option to buy, but what we're essentially doing is guaranteeing the seller their cash out or their equity. So just an easy math scenario. Let's just say that the seller is trying to sell the house for $300,000. We agree on that price. Their loan balance today is $250,000. So they have $50,000 in equity. That's what we lock in. So I say to the seller, I say, look, I'll give you the $50,000, but you're going to have to wait for it. Typically it's, 5 years. So on or before 60 months, I'll give you the $50,000 and the balance of your loan will get paid off at that particular time, whenever we cash you out. In the meantime, we're paying your mortgage payment to the bank direct every month. We cover all maintenance and repairs. And again, you can go do your thing, move on, go to the next house. And you got this $50,000 coming from you, and you don't have to worry about the property.
Yeah, not worry about it. And these typically are not properties that are hugely distressed, right? I'm guessing, maybe to some degree, but these aren't like huge rehabbed houses. Wholesalers are going to come in and offer them 20%. 20 cents on the dollar for those type of assets where these are usually houses that are, you don't have to do a lot of work to. Is that appropriate to say, or?
It is very appropriate. And then on the flip side, when we go to sell it to our rent to own market, they take the house as is. So, I've bought houses that have kitchens from the 1980s and, buyers have purchased them, on my end, rent to own. So yes, we don't really get into a lot of rehabs. Because again, that's a different bucket of investors.
So two more things just to go through real briefly here. The exit strategy with all of these, it doesn't really matter how you acquire it. Like you have ownership of it if you're on title 2 out of the 3 ways, or you have control over it with future ownership when you exercise that option. What's the exit strategy? Are you keeping these as rentals and being a landlord and renting them out? Are you finding a buyer that you're qualifying? Are you then assigning it to another buyer? I mean, are all those options on the table, or what do you normally do?
They are. And regardless of what you're doing in real estate, if you're long-term, if you want to be a long-term rental, even Airbnb, short-term rentals, if you can acquire properties this way, and own them, you have so much flexibility on your exit. What we teach, because of the 3 paydays, which is cash now, cash on a monthly basis, and then cash on the back end, is finding a buyer. And there's a ton of buyers out there, especially now with rates going up, who are just on the cusp of getting a loan. They're so close. They just need some time, whether they're self-employed, they're business owners, and they just need a little bit of seasoning with the banks, or they had a life event like a divorce or a death or something that set them back temporarily with their credit. We place them in the home on a rent-to-own basis. We lock in a price for them, and then they give us a monthly payment. They give us a down payment, which is equal to anywhere from 10 to 20% for the property. And once they cash out and get their loan, then I go and I pay the seller off.
So when you talk about the 3 paydays, correct me if I'm wrong here, because I may get this wrong, but you're getting today money, you're getting cash flow money over time, and really kind of forever money in that case, depending on how long you stretch it out. And then you have this exit sum. And so one would be their down payment that you're acquiring. So you could, in theory, be into one of these deals for little to no money down, to have control or ownership of it. You find this end buyer that you've qualified. They put the down payment that's coming to you, right? That's your first income. And then the difference between what you're paying the seller on their mortgage, or just whatever you've agreed to on terms, and what you're doing on the option for the buyer, right? So if you have $1,300 going to the seller and you're renting out for $1,800, there's $500 a month. And then you have this agreed sales price at a future date that they need to take over the property, which there's usually an equity position. Did I say that right, or anything you want to add there, Brian?
You did. It was perfectly. And then the part that confuses people is on the back end. That this is the beauty of doing something on terms with the seller. Is, again, I mentioned in the lease purchase scenario that I'm locking in the equity of $50,000. Okay. The loan balance today is worth $250,000. Well, in 5 years, the loan balance is going to be, $240,000. The difference between the $250,000 and the $240,000 is what I keep. So I get the $10,000. The seller doesn't get that because I've been paying the mortgage the whole time. So the principal pay down of the loan is also another component to this. To the 3 paydays that it's hard for some people to understand. But you get to keep all that, which is why if you can get principal only payments to a seller on owner financing, and you're paying a seller $2,000 a month for 60 months, principal pay down, yeah. Do the math. That's a lot of money.
Definitely. And I love that. And so, but are you usually, when you're selling the property to your end buyer, let's say it's someone that you've qualified as a renter, are you marking up the price at all, or to some degree? I mean, there's that as well as the principal pay down.
Yes, we do market it. We do mark it up because we're locking in their price now for a date out in the future.
Right.
And then again, an appropriate lease payment. And while they're getting their credit situation figured out and work together to help them get a loan, they would buy it at that price, whether it's 2 years or 3 years down the road.
And potentially, I mean, they could have significantly more appreciation in it as well. So you might be leaving someone on the table, but still the numbers make sense for you, and it's a win for the end buyer. What about when the market doesn't, let's say they get an appraisal when they are able to obtain financing, and you've sold someone that at $300,000 and appraises $280,000. What happens then?
Who's the skeptic now, Zach?
Yeah, no. I know I'm dominating, Adam. I'll let you take over with the what ifs, but
that's a great question, because that all gets asked. That all gets asked by the sellers, by the buyers, and the answer is, okay, if that were to happen, that specific scenario, we can pivot, right? But all the buyers go in knowing that, hey, you might have to bring more money to the table, right? So if their price is 300 and their price is for 280, they got to come up with the 20 grand. Okay. Now I haven't had that happen yet. Fortunately, when people were buying houses during COVID and it went up, a lot of people were walking into $50,000-$60,000 of equity or more that I lost out on. So it works both ways. One of the things about terms is you can always go back to the seller and renegotiate. And you can still turn a lease purchase. So if a seller's not comfortable with transferring the deed today because they don't know yet, they're not sure, but they want to do this, I can go back to a seller in 12 months, say, look, I'm paying your lease payment. I'm paying your mortgage for a year. I can give you X amount of money. I'm calling all my sellers. I can give you this. We'll transfer the deed now. Now I own the house. Now I can go back to the buyer and owner finance the buyer, and they'll never have to go to the bank. I can essentially become the bank because I have the deed and I can finance them. So if I have a loan that's at 3%, I can finance the buyer at a higher percent interest rate, and they'll be fine with it because they don't have to go through, the process, the very rigorous process of trying to qualify for a conventional loan.
Yeah. Do you have systems to check in on this too? Like you kind of monitor where you're at with your different, sometimes it's like I fall into the category wanting to just do it and forget about it and just let it run its course. But you do need probably be checking on where your lease options are and what the most strategic thing is to do at that point, right?
Yeah, we look at it every week. So we're looking at, whose lease date is up for our buyers and, their deposit schedule, because not all buyers give us their full down payment day one. We schedule it out, and we're always looking at, an opportunity like, okay, hey, can we talk to this seller and potentially extend the term or take ownership of the property? So we're always looking at that on a weekly basis.
So whenever you are doing this, what happens? Something happens, they can't buy it at the end, like they just lose their job, they can't afford to do it, and your payments coming up to the actual original owner of the home. Maybe you don't have the 50,000 in your bank account right then to pay him. Like, what happens in that scenario?
Yeah, that has happened to me, where I had one of the second house that I purchased. Cause again, we want to give the good, the bad, and the ugly here. You're in real estate. You're ultimately going to be dealing with difficulties and challenges and solutions. It doesn't get any easier. The fact that I have a coach is super because I can go to him. I can go to Chris and say, all right, this is the scenario. What do I do? That's why I love having him as a coach. The second house I purchased on a 5-year lease option. After about a year, the buyer stopped paying me. I paid the seller's lease payment the whole time. So I've been paying his mortgage payment. I fulfilled my obligation. I unfortunately had to go through an eviction process. Wasn't pretty. I learned a lot. We have the house back. I still have 5 years. I still have 3 more years left with the seller. So I'm good. I can pivot. We've been in communication. He knows what's going on. I have the house on the market. I'm going to be able to get out of it. We have it under contract. Actually, we're closing in maybe 3 weeks, but that's my pivot. Like, I lost the buyer. He couldn't do his thing. I'm putting it on the MLS. I could have put somebody else back in there and still fulfilled my obligation to the seller because I wrote the deal the right way. I have 5 years and I gave the buyer 2 years. So if there's any hiccups, I have a lot of outs. I hope that answers your question.
It's all just being strategic and knowing how to structure both sides of the deal. Again, to your point, coming back to just having a coach, like, this stuff is kind of high level. So you need to, go through it with someone that's experienced, make sure your paperwork is done correctly. Stuff varies. Laws and regulations state by state.
Yep.
So you got to make sure that all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted in this scenario. So what's the quote go, Adam? Something like control everything and own nothing, or
yeah, I believe that's right. Yeah.
I don't know. That comes to mind in this scenario, but this is a great way that you actually can own and control a significant amount of real estate without having to put in just a significant amount of capital. And that's how you grow your portfolio much greater than just saving up, that other down payment. But it is active and you need to actively learn it, right? This is for someone that wants to go down that path. So
100%. Yep.
Now, are you investing in long-term rentals as well with the with the proceeds that you're getting, are you an investor in that sense as well, or are you just kind of, deploying more of your money into, well, I guess $10 at a time into properties? Or
Yeah, well, I'm always looking at different opportunities. One of the great things about being part of a mastermind group and being around people who are smarter than you and above you and better than you, which again held me back for years because I was afraid of that. I was afraid of being around people who were smarter than me. I'm not anymore. I encourage it. Is that I've learned different ways to make money. So I've invested in other real estate deals. I've loaned money to people. I've used my 401k, which I took from my corporate job, and I put it into a self-directing IRA. I invest that money as I see fit. I control it. I don't have to rely on the Wall Street people. And I've learned other ways to make money. Affiliates. I mean, I've been exposed to different income streams, and not just, hey, I got to replace my W-2 job with this one other income, which I think is a mistake. That might rub people the wrong way. But I'm always looking at other ways to make money, so I don't have to rely on one source. And as I have more capital from these 3 payday deals, I can go to a seller, and I have a deal in Wisconsin. I'm going to look at it on Friday. I'm going to be able to buy the seller's house subject to his existing loan by giving him all of his equity up front, and it's going to cash flow nicely. And I'm going to own the house, and the numbers work. So instead of 0 down, I'm going to give a guy 28 grand, but I'm going to own his house forever.
Multiple strategies and multiple streams of income. I mean, that's so important. And it's just getting in that mindset and actually doing it and taking action. And I love that this is a way that you can control more real estate and own more real estate, and also be paid to do that actively, right? And now you get into that real estate professional status as well, which, we won't talk about tax benefits there today, but I mean, that's just huge, right? But Brian, we've been quizzing you on just the idea and concept so much. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your story. So can we fast forward to kind of where you're at today with what your portfolio looks like and some cool things are going on? And then I'd love to hear any just like case studies or cool deals that you'd like to discuss.
Yeah, like I said, I'm working really towards building my team now, because in the beginning I was super active with the day-to-day stuff, which is, calling sellers and going on appointments and, being wearing every hat in the business. Right. So I basically, and you got to be careful when you go into business for yourself, is not to become a W-2 employee in your business. Okay. You have to give up, and you have to train people, and you have to let your employees run the business. And that's really what I'm focusing on right now. It's like, okay, over the last 3 years, I've learned how to do this very well. And I'm helping other people coach in the Wicked Smart community. Like I coach people, and I'm training my team to be able to do this, so I can just kind of, be in the background and do what I do best, which is structuring the deals, building the business, and looking at different ways to acquire deals and not just be, one lane. Right. And that's really what lights me up, what I'm passionate about. And then also helping other people. I have this story I told you about where I was stuck for 25 years, 17 years in a job that I didn't like, and missing my kid grow up. I think a lot of people need to hear that. And there's a lot of folks like that. And I'm trying to get the word out and speaking to people to make them understand that you don't have to repeat what I did and wait that long. There's another way to do it. And it's really revolves around your mindset, how you think. When you start thinking differently, like a lot of people can say, I'm going to be going off on a tangent here, but a lot of people want to get into real estate, or they want to get into the stock market. They want to do something else because they hate their job so much. But unfortunately, they don't take the time to evaluate their situation right now and where they want to be and set goals. It's just like, okay, well, I'll do this other thing and I'll be happy because I'll be out of my job. Well, ultimately, each step fails, and I did them all. Like I tried to trade stocks. I tried to write a blog. I tried to do affiliate marketing. I went from one step to the next, and it all failed inevitably because I wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I didn't take the time to evaluate what my situation was right now at this particular time. And it wasn't until I did that and then hired a coach that I was able to see the hockey stick, type of improvement. And you have to do that first before you can just expect your life to change by, investing in real estate or buying your first rental property. I don't know if you feel similarly about that. I'd like to get your take, but that was really what made me successful versus I think other people that are trying to get into a business of their own.
Man, you just hit me deep there where I was like in a trance because I was like, man, we got to cut that and replay it just as a clip where it's like, that is important. We don't, and I get in the habit too much of talking about like concrete details and, this and this and this, but we got to go back to the mindset and the philosophical change. And I remember when I was learning about real estate and stuff, I always wanted okay, give me the answer. A lot of what I went through was I ignored the mindset stage of stuff, and I like, just give me the answer, right? Like, I just tell me what to do and I'll go do it. And now reflecting back, it's like mindset is exactly what it's all about. And yes, while that's a little warm and fuzzy sometimes and less concrete details, the mindset is the first aspect. You need to put your mind in the right place and then decide to take action on that, and then keep your mind in the right place consistently, right? And that's through surrounding yourself with the right people, and that's through remotivation and seeing the traction go, as you build your business. But that's hugely important. Brian, as we kind of finish up here, just real quick, I'm kind of curious, how many deals would you say on a creative, like what's a realistic expectation? How many deals are you roughly doing on a monthly or annual basis? And can you choose a deal that was just like a huge home run? Now, obviously, they're not all home runs. It's a portfolio is built on base hits. Since you guys were talking baseball earlier, but what I do want to hear about a home run because that's always exciting. So, but first, how many deals are you doing on a monthly basis?
Yeah, so we're averaging about 1 to 2 per month. It's been a little bit of a slowdown with the market because again, the sellers are still dealing with the hangover. If I can list my house and I'm going to sell it in 25 seconds, those days are over with, at least temporarily. But that's our normal range. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but with my average 3 paydays, again, the down payment, the monthly, and the back end, I average about 75,000 across all 3. So you don't have to do a lot of these types of transactions to really gain some momentum and build wealth. Now, as far as a home run deal that I did, there's a couple of them, but one was I was able to get a house, $285,000 house. I won't give the details because I know we're running out of time here, but the guy had a 15-year loan. Okay. So he had a 15-year loan and the principal pay down was about $750 a month. Plus I have a monthly spread of about $300. So I have $1,000 a month delta on the property. I put 0 down and I sold it to a buyer. I think I sold it to the buyer for $310,000. It's worth way more than that now. It was a $90,000 deal for 36 months, and I didn't put any money down, all because the loan was right and the situation was right with the seller. They had bought another house and they had to move, and they couldn't afford 2 mortgage payments. I solved that problem.
Was that a subject to deal?
No, it was a lease purchase, and it happened really, really fast because again, they were leaving. They had to go to this other house that they built. And they had already committed to it. They didn't need the money. So I said, all right, I'll lock in your equity. Here's the term. And because the loan was so attractive, I was okay going 3 years because of the $700 a month pay down.
And then you found your end buyer. Were they your qualified buyer renting the property, or did you just?
I placed a buyer in the home. She's going through a divorce and needed a place to live. Her credit was hit pretty hard by the divorce, but she has stable income, good employment. And she's set to buy the house. I think she's probably gonna cash out in maybe 6 months.
Nice.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate it. For anyone interested in learning more about it, we have a special link set up where you can get some free things. And also, if you tell them that you came from, if you sign up through this link and tell them you came from Rent to Retirement, I believe you can get a free ticket to an event they have going on. And that is at smartrealestatecoach.com/retire. That's smartrealestatecoach.com/retire. If you want to look at the long-term buy and hold after you make all that money doing what we talked about today, you can go to renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com and see the inventory we have there. If you have any questions about this or anything else, email them over to podcast at renttoretirement.com, and we'll get the answer for you one way or another, whether it's Zach and myself or going to the Wicked Smart community and finding out from them. That's podcast at renttoretirement.com. Don't forget to leave us a review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks for watching the Rent to Retirement YouTube channel. Check out some of our other videos, like this one, or this one here.